Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins, a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and sacred scriptures, along with information on topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Corda. Wineskins is brought to you by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview Tom Rudnicki and Alan Ricks on prison ministry. We will also look at the life of St. John of God, as well as reflections on the readings for this first Sunday of Lent. That and more coming up on Wineskins. Joining me now is Brian Corbin with Catholic Charities USA. And Brian, glad to have you back on Wineskins.
Well, thanks, Father Jim. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
You know, last time you were with us, we talked primarily about the mission of Catholic Charities USA and also how Catholic Charities addresses poverty and becomes an advocacy for that. But one of the areas that I think I'd like us to talk about is what's kind of the vision down the road that Catholic Charities has. And I think in your planning, there's that vision that kind of drives you. So what basically is the vision for Catholic Charities USA?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. And Catholic Charities USA is a member organization of 165 diocesan agencies, like the Diocese of Youngstown Catholic Charities is a member. Catholic Charities around the country has served 8 million people. We have 2,500 social ministry sites. We have about 43 different programs that we offer throughout the country. So it's a pretty large system. Let me start with the mission first, and I'll get to the vision. Our mission is to provide service to people in need, to advocate for social justice or social structures and the common good, and to convene others in the church to do the same. So to serve, to advocate, and to convene. So that's our basic mission. Our vision, now in the past couple years, we had a new president, Sister Donna Markham, who's a Dominican sister from Adrian, Michigan, who led us through a whole process. All the dioceses got together and talked about what is the vision we want for the next 5 years and what are some of our priorities. Our vision statement came from a challenge from Pope Francis, who sent us a video in 2014 at our national meeting and said, Catholic Charities, go out in the streets, find people that are marginalized, that are in need. So we came up with this vision statement that says that we labor in the streets, inviting and serving those who have been left out to know and experience the tremendous and abundant love of God through Jesus Christ. We commit ourselves to break down walls of division that keep sisters and brothers separated from one another, excluded, or rendered disposable by our society. With joy, we continue, we resolve to build bridges of hope, mercy, and justice toward the creation of a culture of communal care, responsive to the cries of those who are poor. So that came almost directly out of the Pope Francis's challenge to us to go in the streets and care for people, especially those most vulnerable.
Now, does that kind of direct the priorities now of Catholic Charities USA, and that helps you define what those are?
Yes, and the exciting part is we took that vision and our mission, and we asked the 165 diocesan leaders, what are things that we really should be focusing on? We did a lot of social science research, a lot of talking, and we came up with 7 major areas. The first one is affordable housing. We have this incredible need to construct and build and manage new housing for people, for families. It's all the way through. So everyone said, yes, affordable housing. We've got to be in that world. Right now, Catholic Charities around the country owns over 31,000 units of permanent housing. We have 75,000 people living in those homes right now. That's just permanent housing, plus domestic violence shelters, temporary shelters, and emergency shelters. But we want to get affordable housing out there. The other area is immigration and refugee resettlement. Catholic Church is one of the largest providers of refugee resettlement in the world, in the United States, and working with immigrants to continue to work on those areas. The other area that we're thinking through is integrated health and nutrition. Why do I say that? Over 50% of the clients that come to our door are hungry, or they come knocking saying they need some food. That's an indicator. What's going on in health with them? And so our goal is to help people connect better to the healthcare systems in their communities, but also to remind healthcare systems that 60% of why a person may not be well physically might have to do with their social environment and how we can be part of that. Another area is doing social enterprises and social ventures. Another area is continuing to work in disaster operations and help people be prepared for disasters and recover from disasters. And we will constantly do advocacy and social policy analysis. And the final tenet that we're going to have is forming leaders for the future. Many of our leaders are lay people who have not gone through theology schools or seminaries. That's been a shift in leadership. And how do we continue to deepen their faith and be a witness to the gospel?
In the last few minutes that we have together, let's kind of talk about that last priority. I would imagine that Catholic Charities, like many organizations, rely on volunteers, rely on those people that give of their time, their talent, and also their treasure. Why are they important to the life of Catholic Charities?
For many reasons. Certainly one is that those volunteers take their personal commitment and their faith, and they want to do something to help their neighbor. And as Pope Benedict said in Deus Caritas Est, he challenged Catholic Charities and Caritas agencies to be the organizers of love, help bring people together to do good work. So I think that's one way that we can just explode what we can do by having so many people who care to work with us, to accompany people, and to bring people in from exclusion. The second reason is I think it's another way that people can live out their spirituality in a very ordinary way. Hey, just coming and bagging a bag of food is a powerful act of a corporal work of mercy, and it fulfills your spirituality of being part of that common good to love God and love neighbor. So that is so important to have volunteers with us.
And certainly in our experience, those people who give of their time and their talent get more out of it than what they're actually, the people that are getting out of it.
Exactly. And one other group of volunteers are those our donors. Very important group of people that fund parishes, fund Catholic Charities, fund other great efforts. And we're so appreciative of those people. And many of them serve on our board of directors to help give guidance and direction. So they help in governance as well as in direct service.
Well, Brian Corbin, we certainly appreciate your presence on Wineskins again. And again, thank you so much for the work you do with Catholic Charities USA. Godspeed.
Thank you very much, Father Jim. Glad to be here again.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Corda. This coming Wednesday, the Church celebrates the feast of St. John of God. To tell us more is Blake Delsignor. He is a student from Cardinal Mooney High School and a parishioner of Holy Family Church in Poland.
John of God is so called, it is said, because the people did not know his real name. He was born in Portugal and was a soldier who fought against the Turks in the defense of Vienna. He was also a shepherd in Spain, a manual laborer in North Africa, and finally, a seller of religious articles in Granada. It was in Granada that he was converted after listening to a sermon by the famous preacher, John of Avila. John of God then began roaming the streets in a strange and outrageous way that caused others to think that he was deranged, which eventually resulted in him being institutionalized. Through the intervention of John of Avila, he was pacified and eventually released. Having witnessed the harsh treatment given to the inmates in the asylum, John decided to found a hospital in which he could care for the sick and the wretched. With two companions, he laid the foundation, or what eventually became the Religious Institute of the Brothers of Hospitallers. The rules for eventually governing this institution were not granted until 6 years after John's death. He was canonized in 1690, and in 1886 was named patron of hospitals and the sick by Pope Leo XIII. It was in 1930 that Pope Pius XI placed all nurses under his patronage. The opening prayer of the Mass mentions John's apostolate of charity, and his apostolate to the sick and the suffering is described in the Office of Readings. Today, in his name, we are all invited to practice charity by doing good for others. St. John of God is a persecutor of modern methods of mental therapy and care of the sick. He endeavored, first of all, to heal the mind and spirit before treating physical symptoms. Through the life of St. John of God, we learn that serving our needy brothers and sisters, we also serve Jesus Christ. For Wineskins, I am Blake Delsignor.
Welcome to this edition of Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk about prison ministry. And to help me in our discussion is Tom Rudnicki and Alan Ricks. It's such a pleasure to have you both on the show today.
Well, thank you, Father, for having us.
You know, I had a pleasure of talking with you, Tom, about prison ministry on Wineskins, and I'm glad that you brought Alan with us. You know, prison ministry is what I would consider kind of a new ministry in the church. Before we really get into our discussion about it, I'd like to ask each of you what, first of all, got you interested in it? Why were you drawn to ministry in the prisons? Tom?
Well, I had a friend of mine, Anthony Kovac, who had started the ministry actually at OSP, and he was looking for help to disseminate the Eucharist. And so he put a little note in the bulletin over at Holy Family, and I saw that. And I knew that Father Shorey had a ministry out there for a number of years. So that's sort of what got me involved in it. I knew that I had some good experiences out there, and that Father had done some work there. So that's how I got involved.
And now, how about you? How did you get involved? Was it through other people who were also involved, or was that something you felt drawn to?
Well, a little of both, Father. I had I've been trying to search for some ministries and have been doing some work with the diocese. As Tom mentioned, Anthony Kovac, he seems to be the evangelist on prison ministry. I was at a men's fellowship program over at St. Thomas Aquinas High School, and Anthony was witnessing. And I was already looking at the ministry, but that sort of pushed me over the top. But I was looking for something to challenge me in a ministry, try to do something, something a little uncomfortable, but you have to push me a little toward getting a little closer to my faith.
I'd like us to talk about the process. You know, you don't just all of a sudden say, I'm going to go visit people in prison. There's an actual process that you go through, and also there's learning, education. Try to walk us through some of the steps that you went through. If there's folks that are with us that might be interested in that ministry, what can they expect?
Well, we start out with probably an interview with Mike O'Brien, who's our administrator at the diocese. And we would vet the person that, for instance, would want to come into the program through Mike. And then I would probably meet as a coordinator, would meet with that person. And that's sort of what happened to me, too, although Mike was not there at the time. We had another individual, but we sort of met together. And then we would be brought usually for a visit into the OSP so that the individual would get a little feel for the surroundings there. And then if they're interested in moving forward, then there is some background checks that our friends at OSP have to go through, with a little bit of bureaucracy there. And then there's actually a 4-hour training program once you're vetted by the OSP. After that, I would normally take the person through a number of visits, additional visits, to get into the ministry, to see what we do, maybe bring them to a mass and so forth, just to get a feel for the ministry. And then if they're interested in moving forward, like Al was, then we move forward with that. We're certainly looking for people to get into that ministry. It's a real blessing to go in there and work with the guys.
I'd like to ask Al, what was your first experience when you started the process, and what did you discover about yourself as you were learning more about how to minister in the prisons?
Well, the first exposure, I had the benefit of meeting with Joe Miles, who was Mike O'Brien's predecessor, and Tom, and spent an hour and a half with them talking about the expectations. And then I spent some time, then I went to the prison. I made the decision early on that I was going to do this. It wasn't really a trial. Certainly after a meeting with Tom and Joe, I wanted to proceed. So I spent some time with Tom, several weeks, went with Tom and assisted him, or went around, made the rounds in the prison. And I think that it just really touched my faith. I just really felt closest to God when I'm in prison. I'm standing there, the steel door, and the prisoners on the other side. In my particular case, I do. There's some open involvement in personal contact. Just something my faith drew me to, and I just feel I've grown in my faith, and certainly it's been a wonderful experience.
You talked about your ministry towards them and how it has strengthened your faith and so forth. And I remember something that Tom had said a while ago in one of our former discussions, that the people in prison sometimes long for this human contact, and they don't always, unfortunately, get it because of their situation. So what does this human contact mean to them, but also to you?
Yeah, it's extremely important there. Most prisoners there are level 5 or level 4, and they cannot have human contact with their families. And that is a real big issue with them. They strive, it's one of the leverages that the prison has to improve their behavior so that they can actually at some point go to a lower level where they can have visits. And I didn't realize how meaningful that was to these individuals until we had the handshake of peace at one of the masses where they opened the porthole. They actually, at that time, they let us actually put our hands in there and shake hands. And one young man said, this is the first time that anybody had shook my hand in 5 years. So that gives you an idea how they long for it and how human beings long for you. But that was certainly an enlightenment to me. And it really bonds you with the guys when you can have that human contact.
They spend 8 hours a week out of their cell. And so that human contact is important, whether it's a chaplain there or a Catholic minister, such as we do. But that's very special. And they generally have they're very happy to see us.
Oh, yeah.
The one thing that I've always experienced, and I've been not necessarily full-blown prison ministry, but I've gone to visit parishioners in prison. There's a sense that we minister to them, but they really minister to us as well.
Right.
You know, isn't that your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that not even conversing, but just their presence and just the fact that we do a gospel reading or some reading from the Bible, and then we do a reflection, offering Holy Eucharist. It's that connection. It's that eye connection. It's not necessarily in words, but absolutely that's true. I feel the same thing.
It's amazing sometimes that the homilies and the priests are not normally. They'll have feedback during the homily. They'll make a comment, and some of them are very literate and have studied the Bible. So it's really an interesting thing. It's really a good boost to our faith when we come in there and we start preaching to them a little bit and doing reflections, and they come back with us and saying, yeah, we get it, and how about this thought, how about this idea, this faith statement. So it's impressive. Definitely is as Al said, it's a two-way street between us and them, and we certainly get as much out of it as we give, I think. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to remark that this is one of 5 prisons in the diocese. Right. Not all prisons are at this level. This is Supermax.
This is Supermax.
So this is a little different. When other prisons I have not done prison ministry, and others where there's more of a gathering and an open forum. So there are several levels, but this is certainly the one that we experience.
For more information on that current issue and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doy.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
I am Marino.
Je suis Marino.
I am Marino.
I believe that we are all connected to each other, and that is the gift of compassion that unites us and makes us one. It doesn't matter what language, culture, or tradition we come from. We can share compassion wherever we are.
Marino, an American Catholic organization of priests and brothers, has been reaching out to those in need for nearly 100 years in 26 countries throughout the world. Marino dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, and with your help, they can do more. Missioners, workers, volunteers, supporters, we are all Marino.
I am Marino.
Yo soy Marino.
I'm Father Mike, and I am Marino.
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 The song we have for you today is from the CD called From a Quiet Place. It is by Vince Ambrosetti. And to tell us about the scriptures for this first Sunday of Lent is Father Bill Lovelace. He is pastor of St. Brendan Church in Youngstown.
There was an old saying that people used when they made a mistake. It was worded like this: "That's why there are erasers on pencils." It was an acknowledgement that all people make mistakes. Perhaps today we might update that old expression to say, "That's why you have a delete key on your keyboard," or maybe, "That's why you have autocorrect when you're texting," or maybe not. The more accurate joke today goes, "To err is human, but if you really want to mess things up, you need a computer." Be that as it may, all of us humans make mistakes, and some of those mistakes are sins. We have a choice to do right or wrong, and sometimes we make bad choices and do wrong. Why do we do that? Because we're tempted. The first reading today from the book of Genesis explores that mystery of temptation and sin. In the story, God created humankind, male and female, and placed them as gardeners in the midst of all the beauty of creation. God told them that they could eat from all the fruit of his garden, but he told them to avoid the tree right in the middle. Yet I think we know that they did not follow that command. Why? Because a tempter came and changed their perspective from the innocence in which they were made. The serpent, later in Scripture identified with the devil, introduced doubt, and the woman, and later the man, came to see the forbidden fruit as desirable. So the woman ate the fruit, and so did the man. But what they really discovered was guilt and shame. Guilt because they had done something wrong, and shame because now there was sin that separated them from God. But thank God, that is not the end of the story. In St. Paul's letter to the Christian people of Rome, he reflected on the good news that, although sin separates us from God, God opened the way back for us through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And he expressed it as a contrast. He wrote, "Just as through the disobedience of the one man, Adam, the many were made sinners, so through the obedience of the one, Jesus, the many will be made righteous." The obedience of Jesus was expressed throughout his life, but the story of his temptation by Satan illustrates perfectly his refusal to turn away from God. We see the temptation today in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus had been baptized by John the Baptist in the Jordan River, but the Spirit of God then directed him into the desert of Judea to fast and to pray before his public ministry would begin. That was the scene in which the devil appeared to him to tempt him. After a long fast of 40 days and nights, Jesus was hungry, and the devil tempted him with a quick fix. He told Jesus to end his struggle by using his divine power and changing the rocks of the desert into bread. But Jesus' power was intended to glorify God, not to make things easier on himself. For he came not to avoid, but to face and endure struggles and suffering. So he rejected that. Then the devil took Jesus into the city of Jerusalem and led him to the high wall of the temple. He then told Jesus to throw himself down from the wall, looking for God to protect him. But Jesus' role was not to test God's faithfulness, but rather to be faithful to God. So again, he rejected the devil's temptation. Finally, the devil took Jesus to the top of a mountain and showed him all the wealth and splendor of earthly kingdoms. He told him that he would give him everything if only he would worship Satan's evil power. At this, Jesus banished the devil because there was no question that Jesus would only worship God his Father. So what do these scriptures enable us to see today? Well, we see humans, including ourselves, giving in to temptation and committing sin. But then we also see Jesus who never sinned, who suffered and died for us, and then rose again. He is the one who redeemed us, who took all the weight of our sin upon himself, and he is the one to give us strength to remain faithful to God, even when we too face temptation. And that's a good deal. In fact, the best one. For Wineskins, I'm Father Bill Lovelace.
As Christians, we cannot convert the world by the sword or the dollar or through government policies. The only way to convert the world is through the love of Jesus Christ. Today, let us trust in the power of Christ's sacrificial love to to draw a lost world into a love affair with Him. Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Corda, saying thank you for being with us. Have a blessed week.